Hey Curvis, this is Jemmy. Welcome to the 94th episode of the Curve the Cube podcast. And this is a great episode. I'm so excited to bring it to you. I spoke this day, which also happens to be my birthday, to a really amazing woman. She's full of girl power. She is, her name is Jennifer Martin, and she is an internationally recognized spiritual leader, motivational speaker, yoga instructor, and just really, really cool girl. And what I love about her and this conversation that we had was she really exalts a lot of the message that I'm trying to convey with Curve the Cube, but even bigger. She's talking about how she brings yoga and spirituality together and helps you learn how you can be strong and also keep being vulnerable to your path and your purpose in life. And she's just such an inspiring and wonderful human being. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I couldn't have asked for a better one on my birthday. So major kudos and thanks to Jennifer for taking the time. We met up at the Hilton after her class. She teaches yoga classes there at the Hilton in West Palm on Saturdays. So be sure to look up her yoga class and find her at jennifermartinyoga.com and look her up on social media. Instagram is probably the best way to follow her. She posts so many wonderfully inspirational, motivational messages. I'm a huge fan. So I really want everyone to listen to this podcast and really think about and reflect on how you can find your own passion to do your thing. Enjoy!
The cube will now initiate.
Jennifer! Hey, I thought that was you.
How are you? Sorry, I'm just getting done with class.
Oh, it's okay.
A little bit sweaty, so.
That's okay. I expected you to be. I mean, you're a hardworking girl. How are you?
I'm so good.
Good.
Great.
You ready to sit down?
I so am. Let me just
sure?
make sure. Yeah, I was just going to say bye and I'm going to run the rest
Go
of
for it. Go for it. I'll be here.
I'm not all antsy.
Okay. No problem. Hi. Oh, so how did your class go?
It was great.
Good.
Yeah, it's always such a great way to start a Saturday.
Oh.
With everybody.
Sounds like it gives you bliss, like it's on your hat.
It does.
You seem very
energetic
serene
bliss.
and peaceful.
Energetic bliss, for sure.
That must be a nice Zen place to be energetic, but also like peaceful. That's when you know you're doing the right thing, right?
It's so true. I mean, for me, I teach a pretty rigorous physical practice of yoga.
Yeah.
But it makes the surrendering in Shavasana that much sweeter.
What was that word? Shavasana?
Shavasana?
What's that?
Yeah, Shavasana is the last pose that we kind of do, and it's just a laying down and a finding stillness, and really dwelling in that place of peace that we worked so hard to get to throughout the practice.
Right.
It's that space where you finally, there's nothing else to move, there's nothing else to do. You get to just simply kind of be and breathe.
That makes sense.
Reconnect.
It almost feels like you've reached some sort of pinnacle through the practice of yoga, and now you're at that mountaintop and you're just enjoying the view for a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Matter of fact, I talk about when we're breathing about, on the inhale, kind of finding elevation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then on the exhale, taking that deeper seat within your conscious self.
Yeah.
And just kind of reconnecting and restoring and building faith and trust and, for that moment, knowing that you're exactly where you need to be.
That's great. Because especially in this day and age, I mean, there's so many infinite number of distractions and things that take us out of that center that we need to reconnect with within ourselves.
We're getting pulled in so many different directions.
I know.
A lot of it is so positive. But if you're constantly striving and doing and not just taking any moments to pause and be grateful and just connect to that higher level of grace. You don't know, are you really even moving in the right direction
Exactly.
sometimes? So there's a power in pausing.
Right.
And allowing, to see if you're not moving in the right direction, to that allow you to be that awareness that you need to kind of, redirect.
Exactly.
But even if you are, to expand that moment and that capacity of enjoyment.
Right.
Can you stop and just take a breath and rejoice for this moment right here, right now.
Right.
So it's a balance.
Yeah. It's so funny how we ended up quote unquote meeting because Women's Empower Expo followed me on Twitter, and I was looking through their Twitter feed, and I saw your the post that they have about you, and let me back up. I saw the post that they have about my friend Michelle, who also has dedicated her life to yoga, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Let me go back and post something. And I went back real quick, and I saw the image of you, and didn't even take a second to look and see if it was Michelle, and I just posted it. But it ended up being the greatest mistake ever, because when I looked into your background, I was like, this girl shares so many of the same philosophies and the same message that I'm trying to do with the podcast, which is to get people to just take a second, right? Reevaluate what they're doing, because we can get so caught up in the everyday current of life that we don't take that second to pause and think, is this where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing? And my message with the podcast is just take a moment, pause, remember what you were designed to do and what you're here for and your true self and your true passions, or find it if you haven't yet.
Right.
And then try to focus on that more in your life. And so when hearing your back, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl speaks so many things to me.
And I'm so excited to actually at the Empowerment Conference. I'm going to be a speaker there.
I know. I'm so excited.
That's going to be so great. And what you're speaking to is exactly what the lecture is on. It's how do we use our fear to empower our faith and to get in agreement with our soul's purpose.
Right.
Yoga for me is a very important tool, but it's one of many that I use to kind of connect on a higher level and define purpose and passion, and to share, God-given gifts.
Right.
And I've been very fortunate, through a physical practice. And it's funny, even with my followers on Instagram, I mean, of course, we're posting all of these ridiculous pictures and, but we hope for them to be inspiring. And more important, I hope that they just capture someone's attention and that they read down below for a deeper meaning.
Right.
I'm really starting to move in this, funny enough, to move in faith is kind of my mission. And it's how do I kind of play on my yoga platform and my background, but pull in more of the spiritual life coaching, which I'm so passionate about.
Right. So yeah, let's get into that, because you describe yourself, I'm going to read, you describe a spiritual life coach and yoga teacher. And when I read that, I thought it was interesting how the spiritual life coach came first. And, sometimes that can be a subconscious thing that we do, where we organize our priorities without even realizing. And I thought it was really interesting. And of course, the more I read about you and got to know you, I was like, well, it makes a lot of sense. Spirituality seems to be extremely important to you. So I mentioned my friend Michelle, and she has found yoga and used yoga in a lot of ways, but in particular to help her find her focus and recenter her faith after the loss of her mother. Another good friend of mine, he uses it to just find his focus and passion and try to direct his life in general. So what would you say yoga does for you?
Well, it was interesting, because I come from a really strong faith background in religion. I'm Christian.
Kind of picked up on that a little bit here and there.
Right. And if you ever take my class, you'll hear it. I tell people, I'm like, listen, connect to a God of your own understanding, but you're going to get it from my place of truth and a relationship that I have now. But I think it was a religious, kind of growing up that I had. And so I had that aspect of salvation. And yoga was really just a physical thing for me. I mean, I stepped on my mat coming from running injuries, and I just needed something to fill that void of physical exercise, to physically move energy within my body and to clear my mind, And it was interesting, because I remember when I started just telling people, I'm like, this is not going to be a spiritual practice for me. It is just a physical, and I think it was like...
You really started thinking that? That's so funny.
I was like, this is only going to be this, and we are not going to, and... Clearly, it has taken me on a different path. It wouldn't let you
put it in a box.
It would not let me put me in a box. It went, matter of fact, I think it went, okay, and we're going to show you how this really can be blended. But I think it was, religion was so close to home for me, and such something that I had in my heart that I wasn't ready, especially as a teacher, to step up in that capacity to share. And I think what the yoga...
It can be a little bit scary sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in yoga. There's a lot of misconceptions even from a Christianity standpoint. I know I get a lot of questions like, well, how can you be this strong Christian and practice yoga? And the interesting thing is...
People see a difference?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, if you look back at the roots of yoga, the physical practice, it was developed by Buddhist monks, and it really was just developed as a physical practice, so that they could move energy and get out energy, so that they could then sit in stillness and meditation.
Right.
So it really did just start as a physical practice. Obviously, though, there's science behind it, as your moving body, as you're shifting energy,
Right.
as you're stepping on your mat to create powerful change.
Breathing.
You can't help but awaken that divine energy within
Of course,
you.
yeah.
And so, but that's the beautiful thing, where that can be an understanding of your own.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. And that's the place that I kind of try to share from. You
Right.
know, like let's just have some base rules. Then let's agree that there is something bigger and better than each one of us individually.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something that, I mean, most of our day is out of our control anyways.
Right.
So what's guiding that? You know, and can you surrender to that? Can you live in faith?
Right.
Now, what people individually call that for me is not important in the space of my yoga classes, or even in the book I'm working on, or my space on social media.
I was going to ask if you're writing a book. We can talk about
I am. Yeah, we'll get to that. So, but that's not important to me, you know, because I also understand, especially, you know, when you have this box of religion, people have some really unworkable ideas of what God as an identity is. Right. You know, and so what I encourage people is to just have a relationship with a higher power, whatever that looks like and feels like for you. I'm not here to judge that, because I feel like there may be some individuality of what we call that as an identity.
Right.
But I'm a firm believer that when you're connected to that, when you feel that grace and that love and that kindness and compassion and that protection, that feeling is universal.
Right.
So I'm asking people to connect on a higher level of consciousness and see a unity, right, which is yoga, this union, this bringing together, this merging. So I'm asking people to find that, and not only to find it outside, but have that found within.
Right.
You know, how do you find and connect to that divine power within you? So it's not so outward seeking, it's an inward reflection.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the beauty that yoga does, because it allows you to become more aware and more self-connected, and to draw inward.
You know, my church, the service that I go to, the mantra, I guess you could call it, of it is unplug and tune in. And the idea is, you know, just take a moment out of your week, right, where there normally are all these distractions, and let's just unplug from our phones, unplug from all those distractions, and let's just get together as a family, a community, and just absorb this higher element, and let's tap into it and absorb it within ourselves, and then we can take it back out into the world.
That's so true.
And you know, I do get, when I start thinking about, you know, religion and faith and how those two play together, you know, I was not a believer for a long time, and I don't mean to make this about religion, but I was not a believer for a long time. And when I finally did fall into faith with God and a relationship with God, one of those mistakes I realized I'd been making my whole life is the idea that if I do that, I'm admitting a weakness. But I think in admitting those weaknesses that we should all admit, because we are just human, it makes us so much stronger.
Well, and there's scripture that talks directly to that.
Yeah.
You know, it talks about in your weakness is where I see the strength.
Right, and I thought that when I was looking at what a lot of what you've written, a lot of it talks about both strength and pliability, and you know, and so when I thought about your faith and religion, and people can get so intimidated by the structure of religion that they get too intimidated to just look at the strength and the pliability that can be part of that relationship and help you grow. So what do strength and pliability mean to you? How do you feel like those work together and bettering your life?
Well, I think, you know, there's a vastness that God has a plan for us.
Yeah.
You know, and there's that bowing and humility to that.
Yeah.
You know, I think our logical minds can only keep us in a very closed box of past experiences and understanding. And when we turn it over into faith, now we've expanded that. You know, it's into something more that we probably haven't experienced yet. And, you know, it becomes infinite possibilities in that. And that can seem very overwhelming. You know,
absolutely.
So, but in that expansion, where do you strengthen your stakes in faith, and where do you start to live by faith, not by sight, and to ask to be blessed and protected and guided, you know, so that you are on this greater path, and nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
And you're able to be used for your purpose and your mission exactly where you are, because it didn't happen by accident.
Right.
Everything along your path was built to, you know, to build character, to build a commitment, to strengthen you. It wasn't put into along your path so that you could stumble or be a struggle, but you could find victory over it and use a message to touch others.
So in talking about your path and being strong and being courageous, clearly there was a point at which you thought, I really can make yoga a focus in my life on a grander scale and bring it to other people. What was that day like that really registered for you, that I can really focus my life on this?
Yeah, it was interesting. And I think, I think what I've come to learn, you're always learning when you're on that walk of faith.
Right.
But when I was in medical sales, and I loved it. I had a beautiful condo on the water in Fort Lauderdale, and life was good. And I was just practicing yoga. I came from running injuries. I was not good when I first started. I could not touch my toes. Obviously, if this is where I would have known that my path wasn't ended up, I would have documented it for everybody's pleasure, because nobody believes me now.
Right.
I really, my first couple classes, I was in child's pose, and you want to talk about praying, I'm thinking I may die in the middle of this yoga room floor, And yet I would see these people that were of all ages and of all shapes and of all levels, with smiles on their faces, doing what they could and enjoying it. And I thought, and I was, like I said, in good shape and physically active and not able to keep up, quite frankly. And it was in that moment, though, that I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. And so I teased that, thank goodness I got out of my own way.
Good.
And yoga stepped in.
Yeah.
And I kind of just kept showing up.
Yeah.
So I practiced whenever I could, and then it would go to twice a week, and then 3 times a week, and 4 times a week, until I had a really consistent practice. And then, everybody reaches that spot where they just don't feel fulfilled. It doesn't even necessarily mean that things aren't going right. It just means there's got to be more.
Right.
And I think I've always been one to challenge myself. And so I reached that point, and I kind of just went, you know what? And I had encouragement from friends. Matter of fact, I remember when they first kind of said, you should go open up a yoga studio. You do it all the time. You're great at it. And I thought, that is not what I do. I'm in medical sales. What? We are not.
You're talking crazy right now.
You're talking crazy talk. You need to come on the mat with me. We can maybe work some of that crazy out. I don't know what you're saying to me right now.
Work some of that crazy out.
And yet, they planted a seed.
Yeah.
It planted a seed where I went, well, what if I did do that?
Yeah.
And so it was funny, when I decided to make that decision, I moved up to Stewart. My family was there. My sister had just had my nephew, and so I felt like I was making the trip on autopilot with my car all the time anyways.
Yeah.
And I thought, what would that look like? And yet here it is, a smaller town that yoga's not really big there.
Stewart's beautiful. I love
Stewart,
it's
gorgeous. But there was no, I taught hot vinyasa. There was no hot vinyasa studios. And I thought, well, God, we're either going to take off or we're going to go down in flames, but we're going to give it a shot, But it was funny, because when you are aligned, there's that settling that knows it's going to work.
Right.
Even if every other reason
so true.
in front of you goes you have lost your mind.
Right.
There's this peace, right? There's this peace. There's this inner knowing in your intuition where you're
but it's just,
no, I think I've got a shot.
Yeah,
and I feel good about this. I feel good about this. And so the trick is, through yoga, is how do you get to neutral so that you can get to that place and understand when you should take up an opportunity or when you shouldn't, or what's really in line with your highest good and along that path. And so I felt really good about that decision. And it was wildly successful. I was really blessed, and I opened up a second one.
Wow.
And, it was awesome. And the people that I was able to come in contact with, the beautiful letters of inspiration of how I touched their lives was humbling. But what they don't understand is that they gave me back so much more.
Yes.
The tribe that I have on social media and things like that, what they don't understand is oh, thanks for the inspiration. I'm no, you guys inspire me.
Yes.
You challenge me. You push me. You give me a reason to seek more, to share more. So it becomes this really beautiful circle of inspiring and being inspired.
Right. And you post some really beautiful messages, very, very inspirational, very motivational, and I love reading them, and I'm so glad now that I have someone who posts those great things so I can tap into. But Where do those thoughts come from? Like, how much time do you spend putting something like that together on Instagram?
It's interesting because I know that there's, most of the people on Instagram have kind of posts already saved. They have things kind of scheduled, and that just never felt authentic to me.
Right.
So I create a little more work for myself, but I have to really feel in the moment that I want to share something from my heart that is speaking something to in my life that I'm either experienced personally or a friend or a family or something that I feel like I'm being called to share. And it comes from that place. And if I don't feel aligned with that, I don't post. Because to me it's more about the message than that. And quite frankly, I don't care if people practice yoga or they don't practice yoga, or, if they look at the pictures, the videos, or they just read the message. The message is more important to me at this point. And going back to probably how I, structured my title and my description, that's more important to me at this point. The physical practice is a beautiful practice, but I also know if God forbid I could not ever handstand again tomorrow, or I could never step back on my mat in the same capacity of what I know that it is today, I'd be at peace with that. I don't have to seek that anymore. I've had that. I've worked really hard for years. But I also know the physical practice is a fleeting thing. It comes and goes. You have injuries, you can't, and you push yourself again. I mean, it's it's very wave-like in that. There's still days I step on my mat and I'm extremely humbled, and there's days I step on and I feel like a rock star, but that shifts, and that can shift moment in moment.
What are you thinking about when you're posing? What thoughts go in your head?
Well, it's interesting. When you're teaching, you have to be so present for everybody else.
Right.
So I'm not in my practice the same. Matter of fact, it's interesting because I'll have time off, and people are like, why are you going to practice? Like, why are you going to go take a class and practice more? Like, you're around this enough. And I'm like, I know, but it's so nice to go practice and not talk and be led. And yes, I have my own personal practice at home, but I still go and take group classes and jump online and take other people's classes there, because you want to be inspired by others, and you want to be led and to be surrendered. But it's a heightened awareness, and especially with how active my physical practice is, it's the only way for me and how my mind works that I have to become so in tuned in each moment.
Yeah.
And with the breath and balancing, flexibility and strength within the body to move throughout the practice in each pose and in between each pose consistently for a full 75 minutes. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in a yoga class. Right. And I know when I stumble or when I fall, it's because I lost connection to it.
Interesting.
So I'm able to very quickly make a different decision and reroute.
So I also saw some posts where you're posing on a paddleboard.
Yes.
So I can imagine if you're trying to stay centered enough and maintain that balance, now on a paddleboard, there are all these other sensations
totally changes.
Influencing you, because you have the motion of the water, you have sounds, you have rustling leaves. I mean, how many times have you fallen on that? I mean,
I have not fallen, fortunately.
Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed.
But
I am so impressed.
I think it's because I know to dial my practice back.
Right.
It's not going to be big movements. It's going to be really centered, smaller muscle groups. Really smaller, stabilizing muscles.
Gotcha.
So it pulls it back in a lot.
Yeah.
But you get a deeper practice sometimes in that way too. And so it's a good balance. I think it's my biggest thing is, you can do yoga anywhere and in any form, so it's to find something that inspires you and to challenge you. Because again, I hope to be practicing yoga very late in life, and I'm sure my practice as I move forward in that is not going to look like it does today.
Right.
So
I have to make some adjustments along the way.
I'm sure I'm going to have to make a lot of adjustments. But at the same token, like I said, how do you do that and challenge yourself in different ways?
Right.
So each time you step on your mat, it's a different experience.
Right.
And just like you talked about or asked me about, what made the decision to own studios and to move in this capacity, I've had to take my next leap of faith in selling the studios and moving forward into these bigger things.
Wow.
And to reach more people. And I'm so grateful for all the people that I was able to connect with in the studios. But I think even through the power of social media, I've recognized, my people on social media, they don't care whether I open studios or not. Most of them are not local. And so it's important for me to teach at places here like the Hilton, and I'll start Harborside at the end of the month, and to still stay very connected to community here, but also how do I bring the work we're doing here and the success that we've had and the motivation that we've exchanged with each other, how do we bring that?
So in taking that next step from owning a studio to deciding to sell it and re-envisioning how you are doing your thing, what was the thought process involved? Like, what did you consider, and where did your imagination go?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I think that there was that level of intuition and imagination and inspiration of, like, you know, of God going, okay, so you took your first step of faith, and you opened the studios, and that was great, but now you become comfortable in that, and like that's fabulous. But I'm calling you for more. Right. You know, like faith is not a comfortable thing. Right. Very true. It's not like it is risky business. That's true. You know, to step out. I mean, that's where when it becomes big, faith to come back in. You need to. I mean, you know, you have to be able to work like it depends on you, and then trust and pray like it depends on God. You know, and so that vision is always expanding to create that space. And you know, and to be honest, there was just changes with things that were happening, and I really held on very close and tight, even though I knew that I probably had bigger plans, or I was being pulled in different directions, and I held on really tight. But I also started to recognize, you know, as things started to unfold, as it naturally does, that, you know, resistance, or when you start feeling like you're relying on your own strength all the time, it's not how it's meant to be. Right. Resistance is really meant to be a course correction back along your path. Right. You know, and you don't have to know how you're going to do it sometimes. Exactly. You just have to take that step forward in faith and that right next decision, and staying present and trusting. He wants us to trust him.
You know, it's interesting. So I told this story a couple times before. So this very short version of the moment I realized I wanted to start the podcast and get the message out. You know, it becomes a question of, well, how do people who are pursuing their passions, how are they doing that? What is that magic thing that they're doing that we haven't figured out yet? And let's put that out there so everybody else can do that thing too. And what I've realized the answer to that is, and you just spoke to it beautifully, that thing isn't the number of phone calls you make every day to potential agents or whatever to sign you. It isn't the number of social media posts or XYZ. It's the courage to recognize the fear, but step through it. Yes. And just start walking.
Well, and that's exactly what my lecture in October is about. You know, I think people are like, how do you get fearless? Fear is never going to go anywhere. No. It is part of you. It's like your shadow. It is always going to be there.
And it can be a really good thing if you allow it to be.
Well, that's just it. So how, instead of turning away from it, do you turn towards it and face it? And go, if I'm that fearful, then it's important to me for some reason. Right. If it wasn't important, if it wasn't challenging me, if it wasn't making me question my identity and thinking if I'm enough, am I big enough to do it, and I need God to, like, you know, help and answer and bring me to the next place, if it didn't invoke those things, then it wouldn't be important to us. Right. And it's interesting because I've studied a little bit of like Scott Pressfeld's work, and what he talks about is that we each in us have a life that we lived and a life unlived. So if we were to close our eyes and someone took away any of the excuses and obstacles and restrictions that we create for ourselves, what would we envision that we're doing with our lives? Right. And for me, that was always
that's a really good way to look at it.
Speaking and guiding and writing and lecturing and still teaching yoga, because I love to teach. I get so much energy out of sharing that passion and that practice with people. But to do it on a bigger scale with a bigger message, you know, and it's all the lessons I've learned on my mat that apply in a greater capacity once I step off of it. And so I envisioned this life, but the reality is I wasn't living in it. Yeah. You know, and fear was kind of keeping me back from that. Oh yeah. So instead of the best of course. So instead of turning away from fear, it's about how do you lean into fear?
Oh my gosh, those are the exact words in my notes. How did you lean into your fear? I swear to God, I have that question here. How did you lean into your fear to propel you forward?
Yeah, so I recognized it. I recognized instead that fear presented itself like a doorway. And fear was either going to hold me back from stepping through that threshold and accepting the life and the promises that I know that God has for me and trust, or the door was going to shut, because there becomes a moment that you have to make that decision.
Right.
And you're either going to turn away in fear, or you're going to face it and you're going to walk through.
Right.
And it's the faith that carries you through the threshold,
right,
and gets you from where you are right now into that life that you're envisioning, and those promises that God has put in your heart.
Exactly.
He's told you what you're going to do. Each one of us have been blessed with these beautiful gifts, and they're different for each person.
Right.
You know, for me, like, I love to teach, and I love to lead, and I love to speak, and I love to write. For some people, that is not their calling. That is not their gifts.
Right.
That is not something that they want to do. So it's how do you start to move in that direction? And I think the biggest thing that I've realized is you don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
You just have to answer that call.
Exactly.
And you have to allow your will to start to match up with God's will that He has for your life. And it's a walk in faith. It's a walk in faith every single morning of, okay, God, what do I need to do today?
I can tell you, I can testify personally that so many times in my life, when I finally did just let that fear go and just go with it, that's when I started to see all these things line up in my path, and it's like it just so magically comes together. It's unbelievable how much things just start to work when you start denying what you're really supposed to do. It can feel really, really good.
When you start recognizing those things, that they're not coincidence.
Right. They're not.
They are put along your path. Like those were divine appointments, and Him interceding upon your behalf and guiding you and protecting you, and knowing, like, okay, I'm doing the right thing.
I can tell you, so recently, very recently, I made the decision to really focus on podcasting as my thing and try to make it my full-time thing. And within 48 hours of making that decision, I had one local business leader telling me, hey, you know what I think you should do? I think you should be a podcaster. And I have a great network of people I can funnel your way to help. Would you ever consider doing that? Yes, I would, as a matter of fact. I had another group of people that I used to work with calling me literally for the same thing. And so all of these things started just kind of lining up, and there's a whole litany, list that is even longer. It just was like, this is definitely okay. I get it. This is what I was supposed to do, and I'm thankful that I'm answering the call, because it's so obvious, when everything falls into place.
So many wonderful opportunities, same thing, kind of present themselves and almost fall into my lap. And it's not because I'm not out there actively working.
Right.
But I also recognize that, God works through people and brings other opportunities to me, and I'm just open to it. I think that's it. You create some space and you're open to those. And I had a text message from someone saying, oh, you're doing so great. It's your hard work, it's your dedication. And I said, it's really not. It's His power. I'm just walking the path that He has for me, and I'm grateful for every opportunity He's giving me, because it's all for His namesake. It's a glory back to Him. And it's my being able to share from a place of faith and not fear that will hopefully inspire others to do the same. Because fear is crippling, and quite frankly, when we start to accept that calling and when we step into that light, that grip of darkness wants to hold on even tighter. Right.
And, so for anybody who's listening that doesn't come from a spiritual background, I'd say interpret the message this way as, just think about all the examples, whether you see it on the news or hear about it on, whatever, friends of yours who decided to take a chance, and how things just kind of started to work in line. You think about the family who experiences a terrible tragedy, and then how the community comes together, and they didn't see a way out of it, but the community comes together and fundraises or supports them or what have you, and all these things come into play, and they're held up, or someone like you who decides, I really want to take a leap of faith and do something that I really love and am passionate about, and how things just fall into place. And so even if you don't come from a spiritual background, listeners, like, just understand that there is a purpose for you, and life is a lot more fulfilling when you seek that purpose and live it.
Yeah, I think we each have a mission.
Absolutely.
And so it's our duty to uncover that and to remember why we're here and to move forward in it. Because the last thing you want to have happen when you get to your last breath later in life, it's not going to be all of the mistakes you made or you know, the things that were disappointments or the struggles. It's going to be any opportunity that you didn't take, that you left uncovered or unfulfilled.
We only have one life on this planet.
We only have one life. And from a yogic point of view, it's interesting. You know, the thought is that we're only given X amount of breaths. So how do you use those? You know, and
is that why you breathe so slow during yoga?
It is.
To preserve them?
It is. It really talks about how do you extend that breath a little bit.
Extend the count.
Extend the breath. Lower the heart rate. Clear the mind. Let's have this spread out a little bit more. Let's not be on a fast-paced sprint to the finish line on that. You know, but I think that's the hardest thing too. And I understand, because if you don't come from faith, if you don't know what that means, to just have it be like it's so nebulous and you almost have to surrender and give up to then be presented, I understand that is the work. Yeah. And that is the challenge. Yes. But know that, like, when you do that, you'll be rewarded. And I think it's okay, from my understanding and my experience, my relationship, is to ask. Yes. Like, you can ask for, like, proof. Like, God, like, how do I know that you're here with me? Right. And, you know, he wants us to make these big prayers, you know, that we have to ask him in. Right. But to be very specific in those, so that when they're answered, we know. There's no question. There's no doubt. It's like, oh, no, I prayed for this and I got this, you know, and that doesn't, I think what happens is that doesn't always happen in our timeline. Right. We can be very quick to dismiss it as it's just never going to happen. But there's also a trusting it's in his perfect timing. Right. And someone else needs to come along our path. We don't know what someone else is doing, that they're working through their own stuff to be put to work with. I don't think that we're here to work alone. And I also am a firm believer that sometimes your prayer and your vision in this moment and what is answered, if it then falls apart, sometimes that is part of the answering of the answer is not prayer always, that you may not even know that you're having yet. And I think not always what we want. Right. And I think about, you know, you could have had the attitude when you were deciding to get, sell your studios. You could have had the attitude of, insert anything negative here. But instead of realizing that your call and your prayer of opening a studio however many years earlier, it's not ended now. It's expanded. It's expanded. Now. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is I actually had an investor. Then we were going to expand even on the two we had. And that ended up kind of falling apart. And again, I had a choice to make at that point where, okay, which path am I going to choose? And I decided to see that as, okay, God, this wasn't meant for me to stay stuck in. Because in my head, I knew I wanted to do this stuff, but I had convinced myself that I could expand the studios and still do this, which was nonsense. It wasn't really able to have happen, you know, but I thought I would just do it. Again, I was relying on my own strength. Right. And God went like, no, it's not really what I want you to do. It's not really what I want you to do. You gotta like loosen this grip. And so, it took me, it wasn't that immediate, like, okay, great, let me sell the studios. Like, that was not my path. I was working very hard to expand on them. Right. And so that it changed and it shifted. And looking back on it now, how do you feel about it? Divine intervention. Yeah. Divine intervention, because I wouldn't have had the space and capacity in my life to pursue these other things if I was still so worried on the details in the studio. So what are these other things? Let's get into it. Yeah, let's get to it. All the fun that's coming up. So I'm really starting to work under this umbrella of the Move in Faith mission that I've founded. And it's a way for me to build upon yoga, but also carry a bigger message. Yoga, like I said, for me, teaching is not going to go anywhere. I love teaching special events and big, and people that come out in some of my classes, some are like, you are basically just preaching and praying over us in a way and inspiring us, to do more physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Like, we're all called to do more. So that's not going to go anywhere. But what it also does is, uses as a gap for one, something that I'm living in my own life, but a tool to share. So there's going to be a book coming out. Yay! We're in talks with publishers now as to what that looks like. The first one really talks about, what it does mean for me to move in faith, and my moving from my physical practice inside my studios to greater, bigger messages outside. And that metaphor of how we choose to step on our mats and get through a practice physically is how we, again, live our lives off the mats.
Right.
And, what does it mean to be in a practice of awareness? What does it mean to be in a practice of acceptance and of commitment and of small things and, pausing and rejoicing? All those things that happens physically and mentally in a yoga class. I mean, when I step on a mat, I have to become so aware of what my energy level is today.
Yes.
Any injuries I have, any, tightness that I have in the body. There's an awareness that needs to happen. And then there is an acceptance that needs to occur. I have to acknowledge where I am in that moment on that level. And it doesn't mean that I have to be happy about it. Doesn't mean that, doesn't mean I have to stay neutral in it. But I do have to recognize it. There has to be some acknowledgement of it.
Right.
And then through that, invite in a sense of gratitude of okay, there's a lesson to be learned. There's work to be done. And accepting the things I can't change and then changing the things I can no longer accept.
Can I ask you, does that practice of settling into where you and accepting where you are physically in order to meet yourself at the mat, so to speak, has that taught you life lessons in general?
Absolutely.
of accepting maybe problems or situations in your life that you need to accept 100%. As they are, and then see
and that's the premise of the book. It's okay, what did I experience on the mat, and then what are the greater message? Because think about it from a practice of acceptance. We're talking about relationships in our lives. We're talking about financial stuff. We're talking about just in general things that we want to change about our appearance. I mean, there's a level of acceptance, and I think that, again, people think that means that it needs to be neutral, but if you're constantly striving and doing and you can't just appreciate for where you are now with some sort of acknowledgement, you're never going to really even know if you get where you want to be.
That's so true.
And there's some things that can't change, and maybe you can't change them for a reason.
Right.
And you can't affect others. You can only kind of hold on and change yourself.
And if you don't acknowledge where you are, you might miss the opportunity to congratulate where you get to.
Of course. How do you know where you're going if you don't even know where you're starting?
Right.
You can't.
Right.
You can't. You have to see where you are.
Right.
And then again, in that practice of releasing expectations that we talked about. Again, when I step on my mat, sometimes I feel super strong, sometimes I don't. And I'm not always in control of all of those things. Who knows what I stepped on my mat to for that day. The same thing what happens when I stepped off my mat. We're not in control with 80% of our day.
Right.
So how do we release that expectations and learn to trust? And stay committed and know that whatever it is, it's building character and strength for whatever we're meant to be.
Very difficult, especially in the moment.
Well, that's why we call it all a practice. It's a practice on the mat, it's a practice off the mat. It's perfectly imperfect. It is a practice. It is a constant
self-evolution.
It's a constant evolution. But the more that you're in practice, like anything, you recognize where you've detoured into fears, insecurities, self-doubts, resentments, and judgments, and you simply choose again. Happiness is a habit. It's a choice. It's a way to see something differently. It's not a gift we're always given, but there is always a different side of the coin. Always. It could always be worse.
I love that. So as we begin to wrap up, where can people find you and connect with you?
Instagram right now is the best place. So Jennifer Martin Yoga, please go and connect there. People can always kind of send me emails too if they have direct questions, if they want to work with me individually as a spiritual life coach, or if they've got, I go into corporations and work with large groups or special events. So those are always options as well. Obviously the speaking tours and stuff that are coming up.
Right.
A website with individual, Jennifer Martin Yoga, which will stay kind of on the yoga class side, but then this Move in Faith mission, which is going to start to happen in a really big way.
Awesome.
And really encouraging people to share their stories with me about how they're moving forward in faith. And that does not have to really do anything with the yoga world. If they practice yoga, that's fantastic. But the prerequisite is just who are those people that are trusting and believing and moving forward in faith. Whether they're a believer in Christ or not, that's insignificant to me. But so that people are accepting their mission, facing their fears.
I love it.
And moving forward in faith.
You should have a podcast.
That's why I'm here with you.
Well, you should have your own. I think it's not. I think 1 hour is not enough. I think you're too good of a message. So is it the 15th of October? When is your
October
talk?
15th. Yeah. I'll be speaking at the Empowerment Conference down in Fort Lauderdale at the Convention Center. It's a really great program that they put together. I think it's $30 for people to come for the whole day and just be really exposed to a multitude of speakers and disciplines and these 30-minute clips of just getting a sense of what people's message are and who they're connecting with. So I can't wait to see people there. And then I actually will be at the yoga joint after that for a Move in Faith Master yoga class where we're going to have a DJ and really talk what it means to live in this courageous spirit of power, love, and self-discipline.
I love it. So everybody look out for that. And would you be open to signing off the podcast? It's really easy. You can just say, this has been Jennifer Martin with Curve the Cube, or however you want to say it,
This is Jennifer Martin with Curve the Cube, and I am so looking forward to seeing how everybody continues to move in faith.
I love it. High five.
High five. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Would you sign my guest book?
Yes.
Yay. So, once it's all full, I'm actually auctioning it off for charity. So I'm excited. So this is, let me make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. So this is your page.
Okay.
Meaning you can just sign it, you can write a message, it's up to you. Awesome, thank you. Oh, so one more thing I wanted to tap into. So we talk about how when you realize that what you want to do, and then when you surrender and you actually move forward, that thing that you're doing is, I found that you can love it so much that you want to do it all the time. Like there's no exhaustion from it. Kind of like what your friends were saying, like you're going to go still practice and do it all the time. So, in curving my own cube, as I say, I've discovered that I really love podcasting, like on this whole huge level, so much that there is nothing I would have rather done than have this great conversation talking about living our passions while podcasting on this day, because it's my birthday.
Happy birthday! That's incredible!
And there's nothing I would have rather done.
Oh my gosh, you are such a blessing, and I am so grateful to spend a little bit of your birthday with you. Thank you for that. That was a gift back to me.
Oh, you're so sweet.
For sure.
You're so sweet. All right, you want to take a selfie?
Yes.
Yay! You're great.
Oh my gosh, that was so amazing. You're really talented. You're right. This is your call.
Stop it!
I'm telling you. So awesome.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much.
So awesome.
This was a blast. This was an absolute blast.
Well, and if I ever get enough courage to podcast, I'm calling you and give me pointers.
Yay! I actually do have a network. I do, like I told you, I'm going full force with it. So now I've started a network and I'm doing podcasting services and helping start shows. So
I will be hitting you up. Is there any way that I can help support you or do more or anything else either?
Oh my gosh, I don't know, but if I think of it, I'll definitely let you know. Absolutely, you're so sweet. That'd be great.
Please do. Oh my gosh, happy birthday!
Thank you.
That's crazy. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get me after class all sweaty.
Woo.
You have successfully curved the cube.
So thank you so much, guys, for listening to this 94th episode. And I wanted to thank DJ John Hitta for the music beds, and also to thank Little Smiles for being the sponsors of this episode. LittleSmiles.org is a charity that, as you I'm sure know by now, I hold very near and dear to my heart. And they help kids in the local community. So go support them with your donation dollars or supporting a fundraiser, one of their events. Go to LittleSmiles.org and help put smiles back on the faces of kids in our community who are really going through troubling times. And I also want to encourage you to follow Curve the Cube all over the interwebs, all over social media. And I also want to mention that for my birthday, since September is my birthday month, I'm giving away dodo cases. So keep your eyes and ears tuned to Facebook for dodo case giveaways and contests, and it's really easy. You just share the post and you have a chance to win. We just honored a winner the other day, yesterday actually. Cindy Jarnett, she won the first dodo case virtual reality super awesome case. So you look for your chance to win the next one. And I think that is all I have to say today. Go to patreon.com, patreon.com/curvetecube for a way to help me get this thing on its own mobile app. It's a really great opportunity, and you get your own shout out on the show. That's it. I will say thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Curvis. Bye.